The cinematography in Searching for Sugarman. Because of the budget, which is very low, documentaries usually have very small budgets. In fact, most of the time, documentaries are not funded by studios. The filmmaker has to go out and make the movie. And then if the movie turns out well, then they can sell it. Very rarely does a studio front load money to tell a story or to make a documentary, right? So because of the budget, and the format by which films like documentaries are made, there's definitely less time to kind of stage, light, and frame shots. So as a cinematographer, you don't have like a lot of time. Like I've been on film sets where I'm shooting and I got 6 hours to run power and set up lights and dial stuff in, and before I even expected to shoot a shot. Okay? That's not how documentaries are made. Documentaries usually come in, you have very little time to set up, you're usually working in small spaces, you don't have access to a lot of power, you're carrying around a very small amount of gear, and there really isn't much crew, right? So the crew is way smaller. It's usually called a micro crew, and it usually has like 2 or 3 people on the crew. Where again, I've been on crews of like 30 or 40 people working to make a movie. And in the documentary, again, you usually have 2 or 3 or 4. You don't always know what's going to happen, and you don't always know what's going to be said. So when you're making a documentary, again, not scripted, and things may happen, and as you as a cinematographer, you got to make sure you're ready to catch all of it. And not just see it, but hopefully there's some light where it is so it's not underexposed, and you can get it into focus quickly. Okay, so it's a very tricky job to be a cinematographer on a documentary filmmaking. The challenge for the cinematographer is to do more with less. You're just not going to have a lot of time. You're not going to have a lot of gear. You're not going to have a lot of money. And you're trying to still make this high-end looking production so that we can sell this thing when we're all done with it. What is a cinematographer filming in a documentary? Okay, so number one, they're going to film a lot of interviews. So whoever the people are that we set out to go, we want to hear from, we set those up. And those are the most controlled settings that we have, where we can actually sit them down and we can put some lights up and make it look really good. Okay, B-roll is something else that we film. So B-roll is just filming whatever the environment happens to be. So here we're talking about a musician. So maybe there's shots of him playing the guitar or not playing. I'm not telling you what we're seeing or what we're not going to see, but like, you know, it's just like if you're doing a news story, you show footage. If you're doing a news story about the local Little League, there's shots of the kids playing baseball and, you know, somebody running up to the snack shack to get a snack and the crowd, the parents all clapping or whatever. That's called B-roll. All the little shots that you might see where we're not actually seeing somebody speak, we're just kind of setting up the environment and the situation and kind of showing us just what things might be like. That's called B-roll. All right. So that's cinematography. Now this shot right here, this is like a shot of what a micro crew would look like in a documentary. I mean, we have one person there who's running sound. He's kind of adjusting the microphone. You have the person sitting there just below him. And then you have the person who's going to be asking the questions sitting next to the camera. That person may be the person, she may be running the camera. It might also be this sound person, but it seems like he's going to go sit down at the table. And look, they have a couple lights set up and a stand holding the microphone. And that's kind of all you get in a documentary. It's very, very small. Whereas on a major motion picture, it may look something like this, where in this particular shot, I see 3 massive lights, that camera on a dolly, which is massive. There's somebody that's actually keeping everything in focus. So if you see the guy on the camera, look just behind him off in the distance, there's a guy sitting on a little stool with a little monitor. That person is keeping the shot in focus for this guy in the foreground on camera. Okay, and then you have the microphone guy, the boom operator. You have people monitoring these flags, those big black things. Those are called flags. Those are 4 foot by 4 foot solids. That's a grip on there operating that. And then behind that person, you have a big camera on a crane. So there's people operating that. A film crew is going to be a massive endeavor, right? With a lot of people, a lot of equipment, and it takes a long time to get every single shot. So it's a much different environment when you're looking at documentary crews versus feature film crews. Acting performance. That's something that's a little different in a documentary. We don't have actors. This is not scripted stuff, and we're not trying to have somebody play a character. We're trying to get them to tell us their story, right? So does this mean what we film is truly natural or objective? Not really, right? Because the director still controls what questions we're asking. right? They still are trying to dictate what we're going to get. And oftentimes the average person, somebody who might end up in a documentary, they're not necessarily comfortable being on camera with all the lights and the microphone and stuff. So oftentimes they have trouble kind of being completely natural. So sometimes that's altering kind of the performance or the interview or whatever, right? So when you see the people being interviewed in here, they're not all necessarily anybody who aspired to be in a movie. And so they're doing the best they can, but they may not be acting like themselves. And we're not trying to make them act like a character or anything. We're just trying to get them and their story out. So the camera in the room definitely changes how things are. So it's still a movie. It's still a film. It's still a production. It's just a little bit different how we're telling the story. Again, we're trying to tell something that's nonfiction. Editing. So often with docs, the director is the editor. And they definitely play a massive role in the way the story gets told. Again, oftentimes you are finding the story. The one that's going to actually get out to the public is this story that you find when you have all the footage and you have the time to lay it all out there. Okay, much of the story is found during that process. Okay, and you have to assemble all the stuff. So in this particular movie, you're going to see archival footage. So archival footage is just like old news footage, old footage of events that happened in the past. That's archival footage. They're going to do a lot of research about events. And one of the events is apartheid, right? We're also going to they're going to be looking up footage and information about this singer, Sixto Rodriguez, who's the artist that they're kind of trying to learn about and get to know through the film. And then you have the interviews, then you have all the B-roll, and you're trying to put all that together to tell a story. Docs don't cut to a script, whereas when we have a narrative film, there's a script with a whole bunch of documentation, and the editor is trying to follow that script and all these notes to kind of assemble the movie that the director is trying to make. Here, the director is just looking through all this footage, trying to figure out what it is their story is going to be. All right, so much different process for editing a documentary. Sound design. Sound design is still really important when you're talking about a documentary. Again, the majority of the information that you're trying to get out there is told through interviews. If the sound is bad, no one's going to want to watch your movie. If we can't hear it, if it doesn't sound good, or it's all scratchy, or I don't know what the word is, distorted, then no one's going to watch your film. Doesn't matter how good your documentary is. If the sound is bad, people aren't going to watch it. And sometimes in nowadays, especially, documentarians still use narrative sound techniques to kind of get us into the story, right? So in this particular film, Searching for Sugarman, the film opens up with music and no image. So you're hearing this song, and we don't even know who's singing or what this song has, what the song's connection to the story is. Okay. And I believe, if I remember correctly, I just watched it a couple days ago. It's a Rodriguez song who's the artist we're kind of searching out-ish when we were watching the film. Also early on in the film, they use sound effects of boats and the environment of what you would hear if you were near a dock. And you have these two producers that are describing the first time they ever saw this guy, Sixto Rodriguez, play. And they're describing what kind of night it was and where this place was that they had to go find him and where they saw him. And then they're using sound effects in the background to kind of bring you into that space like they were in that space. So that is very much a filmmaking technique. The other thing you get with sound is voiceover narration. So anytime you are hearing people talking, but their face isn't on screen, that's voiceover narration. Now, sometimes you record voiceover narration that's very specifically designed to just be over the image. We are never going to see the person's face on screen. That is true voiceover narration. Sometimes you're hearing the people talk about a story, and then they cut to B-roll, which is footage that kind of covers that particular scenario, and that turns into voiceover narration because that's what we're not seeing their face on screen. So there are two different ways to do it. If you wanted to know exactly, again, I saw the film a couple days ago, and I've seen other films since then, actually. So I'm trying to remember if there's actually true voiceover narration, probably during the apartheid segment, there's probably true voiceover narration, but we definitely hear people being interviewed and then they cut to B-roll. So that was kind of fabricated in the editing room that became voiceover. So hopefully that makes sense. The film does have a soundtrack, even though it's a documentary, and the soundtrack is the song of our guy, Sixto Rodriguez. This is who this film is about, and his songs are what they're using as a soundtrack. Now, I didn't know anything about Rodriguez before I saw this documentary, and I was amazed that this could actually happen. Like, I thought it was like a crazy story, which is why I want to show you guys. I think this is just wild what went down with this guy. And his songs are actually pretty good. There's actually 3 or 4 of his songs that I really, really like. I kind of liken him to like a Bob Dylan, and he was around at about the same time. And it's always kind of funny, kind of why Bob Dylan is like an American icon and why nobody's ever even heard of this guy Rodriguez. So it's kind of interesting if you think about it. But I think it's a fantastic movie, and hopefully you guys kind of dig some of his songs. These are our cinematic terms, for nonfiction storytelling, the power of the documentary for this particular movie, Searching for Sugarman. Documentary, that's one of our terms. Okay, so a documentary is just a nonfiction film, a film that is based in truth. We are not fabricating stuff. All right. Another one is called midpoint. So midpoint is that middle spot in the movie where we're looking for kind of a goal shift, like the goal of our main character changes because of what's happened in our film. Okay, a voiceover narration, that is one of our key terms. So voiceover, I just explained it. Sometimes you can have voiceovers where somebody records the audio and we're never meant to see their face. We're just going to see the imagery. And sometimes some voiceover narration becomes voiceover because we see them talking, but then the director decides to cut to other video of other stuff while we listen to them talk about whatever this is. Okay. And B-roll is the footage that is not what the filmmaker, it's not the interview footage. It's other footage that the filmmakers recorded of an event or of stuff that has something to do with our movie. And they're using it to kind of fill in the rest of our story so that we can kind of get taken into the environment, right? Again, I talked about like a story about Little League Baseball, and we see footage of kids playing and parents cheering and people at the snack bar and all that good stuff. And then archival footage is the footage that you would get through research, right? So of a historical event, you go back and you get archival footage of apartheid, for example. That's what we're going to see here. Sometimes it might be still images as well. That wouldn't be footage. That would be archival photos. But sometimes it's still images, and archival footage would be the actual like film reels or video of just older events. So those are our cinematic terms. Again, Searching for Sugarman, I think it's a fantastic documentary. I think it's amazing. Like, I think it's like crazy that this actually happened in modern America. So hopefully you enjoy the film. Again, look for that little video at the end that talks about the story structure plot points, and I'll kind of fill those in for you when we get back to that. So enjoy the film. We'll talk soon.